I don't know whether I should sing or dance with that kind of a welcome. I want to start by echoing what Anthony said and thanking Patrick Lannan and the Foundation for bringing me out here, giving me a chance to see Santa Fe. I've never been here before. I've had a few days, and I'm very, very pleased by what I see and would like very much to come back and have some time to walk around the hills that seem so beautiful from here, but that I'd like to experience on foot. I am here to talk about the economic crisis. You probably already know that. And I'm going to try to do it in a way that makes a story that is difficult also bearable. And so I'll need your help, since at moments as I go along, that combination will look difficult, if not impossible. But I will try. This is a crisis. I wasn't so sure back in 2007 and even into 2008 that it would be a serious crisis. Like so many in my profession, I had not seen just how bad things could get. But that's all better now. I see clearly. And while most of my colleagues in the profession don't, because of their commitments over a lifetime, I do want to tell you a little bit about how it is as well as how we got here. First, how it is. This is the worst economic crisis in my lifetime, which means it's probably the same in yours. This is the 5th year. This crisis really begins in the middle of 2007. So we're now in the second half of 2011. That's really bad. Our unemployment is extremely high, not the 9% you read in the newspapers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in Washington keeps a whole bunch of unemployment statistics. They have even names, U-some number, to distinguish one from the other. The most important of those is called U-6. And let me make sure we all know what that means. It counts 3 groups of people. Those looking for work but not able to find it. That's the 9% you read in the newspapers about. And then it adds 2 other groups. People who have a part-time job but want a full-time job but can't find one. There are millions of those people in the United States. And then it adds a 3rd group. These are the people who have stopped looking. And they get different names depending on which year you look at the statistics. They're sometimes called, and you have to appreciate the compassion here, discouraged workers. More recently, they've been given the name marginal workers, which is probably less good to be called. When you put all those 3 together, you get the U-6 statistic. It's currently 17.5%, not 9%, 17.5%. And that's not my adjustment of the unemployment data, that's the official government data. 17% is 1 out of 6 better than, which basically means that every single American family has somebody in their extended numbers, if it's 1 out of 6, who's in that group, who's not earning any kind of money that they can live on. Therefore, this is not a crisis that is a part of our economic system failure. It is a general crisis.
So, Richard, I want to start with your professors, who you mentioned, and some of the arguments you had. You know, if people had a chance to look at your bio, they'll see that you went to some institutions that one doesn't normally associate with some of the views you espoused this evening. If I'm correct, we're talking about Harvard, Yale, Stanford University, and I'm imagining at those institutions socialist ideas, Marxist ideas, ideas about workplace democracy were not coming from the front of the lecture room. And yet, how did you come to this way of looking at the world?
Well, it's true. My education was one in which I was imprisoned in Ivy League institutions. I went first to Harvard, and I need to explain briefly, my parents, being immigrants, didn't know much about American educational pecking order, and I applied to several schools as a high school senior, And I was able to get into them because I did well in school. And so the question was how to choose them. And my father explained that the choice was really quite simple. It was which college gave us more money, since he didn't have any money, that is. And Harvard gave more money. Otherwise, I would have gone somewhere else. It had nothing to do with Harvard, which they didn't know much about. It had to do with the money. So I went to Harvard. And I remember the first day I was there was an orientation week for freshmen, the week before the school started. And we were addressed by the president of Harvard at that time, a man named Nathan Pusey. And he said to us as freshmen, everyone look to your left, look to your right. In those days, Harvard and Radcliffe were separate, so the young women were not in the room. It was just the men at Harvard. The man on your right is probably going to be a senator. And the man on your left is probably going to be a millionaire. And so you're in a very special place. And I remember in my mind, something went very sour at that moment. And then he said the line that really clinched it for me. We produce the people that run the world. I didn't make this up. That's what he said to us. And the rest of my education at Harvard really was of that sort. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it from day one. And by the time I was finished, I realized that I needed to get an education in other ways of thinking. Harvard did a pretty good job in teaching me the basic ideas that run this society and that work for those people. But I wanted to learn the other perspective, which I was sure was out there somewhere. And at that time, I also decided that having majored in history, I didn't want to do that anymore because I wanted to understand the economics of how things worked, which was missing. And so I looked around for a professor who was in some way critical of capitalism. And I thought I'd go study with him or her. And everybody explained to me there were none of those. And I pushed, and there was one. And he was a professor at Stanford, about which I also knew nothing. And his name, it may mean something to some of you, Paul Baran, B-A-R-A-N. And so I went to Stanford to study with Paul Baran, and he introduced me to Marxian economic theory in a systematic way. And I never looked back, in the sense that he died a year after I got there of a heart attack, so I couldn't continue my education with him. I then went to Yale, because they gave me even more money than Harvard did. And I got my PhD at Yale. But Anthony, you're right, there was no training in critical ways of thinking about capitalism. But what Baran had given me was enough. And so together with other students, I was not alone, we began to study and to discover that there is a vast literature out there that has been